Thanks, everybody. Please have a seat.
So welcome.
Welcome.
We're so incredibly blessed that you've been able to be with us today. Yourself and Gundo, welcome. So wonderful to meet you and just hear some of your story. We've just had such a privilege to get to know you and love you and your family as you've introduced us to you. So thank you today. We really trust that you enjoy hanging out with us for the day. They're here for the day, so make sure you get to connect with them, say hi. What a blessing. You've been head of global surgery at UCT since 2019, and you were actually employed to start up that industry. So tell us a bit about the journey and how it is that you came to leading that.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me, for such a warm welcome. I didn't expect it, so thank you so much. So I guess my journey, I'm from Limpopo province. And so grew up in Limpopo, decided around, somewhere in grade 11 that I wanted to become a doctor. I think one of the things that inspired me, so when I was in grade 7, I was in a car accident, and it was quite a serious accident. Some of the people in the car lost their lives as well. I lost my kidney and fractured my arm. And so a few years later, something said to me, surely you survived for a reason, like God wouldn't have kept you if, you didn't need to be around. And so that both inspired me to kind of decide to live a purposeful life, but also to decide to go into medicine so that I could save more lives. And a few years later, then I got into medical school, became a doctor. But somehow when I was in medical school, I thought I had other talents. I almost quit medicine. Don't ask me for what. But
I'm going to
now you have
ask
to tell us. Sorry.
Well, I called to send my father an email one day, very bravely in second year, to say, thank you for supporting me getting into medical school. I've applied to change medicine and do performance studies. Just letting you know that I want to do drama. My parents were in Pietermaritzburg at that time, so my father gently replied to the email that, okay, thank you for letting us know. Please come home tonight. And for the first time in my life, I had my father saying, I think you've got demons. Go back and finish your medical degree. And afterwards, you can do anything with your life. And so I became a doctor a few years later.
You listen to that still small voice.
Yeah. Then I thought, now I can do anything with my life. And so I did my internship, and then I quit. I got married to Gundo during my internship. And I was supposed to go into community service, and I decided, let me be a housewife. Somewhere along that line, Gundo says to me, you're a clever girl. I cried, and I said, I don't think that's the person you married. If you wanted to marry a clever girl, then maybe you married the wrong person. And he's like, no, you're clever. Think about doing a PhD one day and all of that. And I was just like, this man thought he was marrying something else. Let him deal with it. But 3 months being a housewife, I'm like, I'm a doctor. And I'm a clever girl. So a few years later, I became an obstetrician and gynecologist and got a PhD in obstetrics and gynecology.
So that's cool. Well done. That's cool.
And then had the wonderful opportunity of getting to do my postdoctoral studies in Harvard. And after that, got headhunted by the University of Cape Town to start the global surgery division.
Right, and that was 2019.
That was 2019, yes.
So here we are now, and it's been quite a ride for you in that department. You've done some amazing things with it. And now we are 2025, 6 years later. Now you're in a listening season because you've taken on something in an interim role. So tell us a little bit about that, and particularly around the listening around that, because I know you had many options on the table. You know, there was Geneva and there's all sorts. So tell us what you're doing and how you made the decisions.
Yes. So I joined UCT as an associate professor, and 3 years later, then I got promoted into a full professor, and that was quite a brilliant journey, you know, walking into a university, starting something new. So back then you say, I'm the professor and head of global surgery, and everyone's like, wow, what is global surgery? And that was quite my journey. But over the years, we developed it into a division. We've got students doing masters, PhDs, we run degrees. In fact, I honestly feel it's one of the most established global surgery programs in the world. And I know that because when we visit Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Oxford, I went there with my students and they thought we were going to learn. And then we're having a closed meeting with the professors there, and they said, tell us how you got to where you are so we can get there. And seeing my own students from Cape Town saying, wait a minute, who's leading who here? You know, so that itself was quite a journey. But one thing I learned about myself quite early, and I think same with my husband, is that we are pioneers. You know, God has constantly used us to start things. God has sent us out, and so when you get sent, you don't stay forever, you know, and you kind of get to a place in your season where you're like, I'm done building, you know. And so about 2 years ago, I started feeling very edgy. And I remember a voice saying that you need to begin to transition. And in my heart at that point, I knew that, okay, I've done what I'm meant to do. But then, you know, somewhere in the process, you're trying to tell people that I think I need to look for my next thing. And they're like, but you haven't even finished, you know. And it's hard to explain to someone that I'm transitioning, God is transitioning me into something else when they are looking at the house and saying, but we can't see it. But you knew that I was there to put the foundation. Wow. I wasn't there to build the entire building. And the next person will come along and do that. But somewhere in that process, knowing that, you know, I'm edgy, I don't know what the next thing is. I know God is preparing me for something. Then you start looking around everywhere, you know. You're like, is it this? You meet someone, they're like, we think we like you. You're like, oh, can I send you my CV? So, so the last 2 years has been a lot of failed experiments. At first, I got an opportunity which was almost ready. So firstly, it was in Durban with the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And pretty quickly, I just felt in my spirit, no, this isn't it, and just pulled out even before I went for that interview. And then Johns Hopkins invited me to apply for a position. Also a week before the interview, I just felt, no, this isn't it. And it felt a bit crazy, turning down Johns Hopkins, you know. And then there was a university in Rwanda, also sent my CV, and then they rejected me. And then there's been an ongoing process in Geneva with the World Health Organization. So there I was so sure. I was like, for the last 12 months, anyone who sees me, I'm on my way to Geneva. And even my husband is like, okay, travel well. I'm like, we are going to Geneva, aren't we? He's like, yes, you are going to Geneva. And my kids are like, you know, the younger one went into a mild depression, even saying, Mommy, I don't want to go to Geneva. You know, like, it's okay, do what you want to do with your life, but I'm not going to Geneva. Anyway, after spending a year convincing everyone, my bosses, that I'm going on a secondment to Geneva, then I got invited to do a secondment. Where? In Johannesburg. So by the time I said to the husband and kids, I'm going to Johannesburg for a few months, they're like, oh, thank God.
We'll settle for Joburg. At least it's got the sun.
So, and also in that process, I think God was preparing me, God was preparing the family that there will be an adjustment. And it somehow, when it was, okay, I'll fly into Joburg every week or second week, and, there's just peace in the house about it. It wasn't you leaving us and this and that. Everyone felt like, I think we are all on the same page with this. But the position itself is interim CEO of the Health Systems Trust, and the Health Systems Trust is a public health organization in South Africa. I'd like to say a leading public health organization that really is responsible for health intelligence in South Africa. We publish the South African Health Review and many other important projects and run programs. But it's an organization that works directly with the Department of Health, supporting various programs in the country. And so after teaching on health system strengthening, I really felt, I always knew that my life is not going to end up in a classroom, and that at some point you need to practice what you're teaching about. You can't just be creating frameworks that people need to follow. And so this felt like a very important moment in my life. I don't know how long this assignment is going to be, but I knew that God was sending me out to really contribute to health system strengthening and not just to talk about it. Yeah.
So what I'm loving about your story is that you have a clarity of what you're called to do in your gifting. You're like, well, I'm a pioneer. You guys continue building. I've done what I need to do. Yeah. And there's the listening to the Holy Spirit's promptings for when the next is. And through your story and talking to us, like I was writing vigorous notes of all your moves and all your places you've gone and institutes. Talk to us about how it is that you have been able to discern the voice of God on your journey.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the beginning. I mean, I got saved in varsity, first week of varsity at UKZN. And I think coming from a place where I knew my life needed to count, when I got born again, I knew that it really needs to count. And it's not just going to be about me wanting to get accolades and all of that. It really has to be a Christ-centered life and wanting, Lord, if you've kept me up to now, what do you want to do with my life? And that's really been the journey. It's really been like, send us, Lord, use us, Lord. And so with each thing, it's never been about, how many more accolades should I get or can I get? It's really been about, Lord, where do you want us to be as a family, as individuals? What do you want us to do? How can we be a blessing to this city, to this organization at this time? What is your purpose for this organization, and how can we contribute to that?
Yeah. Oh, it's powerful. In our conversation, you mentioned a lot about peace in your home, peace in your heart, and also the affirmation, how God affirms himself. Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Tell us also in the peace story, please tell us about when Gunda wasn't peaceful at Harvard.
Yes. So one of the, so God speaks to us in many ways, and you can make a mistake, like as you've it's heard even in my own story. But firstly, when you hear God, there must be some sort of peace. And there must be some sort of affirmation and confirmation and reconfirmation. It's not where one day God says, I want you to do this with your life. and the next day you're confused about it. There's havoc in the family, everything's falling apart. We've always had a system where if any of us feel that God is telling us to do something, and with, okay, I'm very clear. I think God is saying I must go to this place. My husband is different. He's like, okay, just say what you want to do, you know, because sometimes you think it's God and it's not God. So he learned very quickly. He's like, if you want to do something, say, this is what I want to do, and we'll decide whether it was God or not.
Yeah.
But learning that I can come with my story. I want to go to Geneva, for example. If there's no peace about it with my husband, my kids are old enough now to have their own sense of what's right and what's wrong. We have our pastors that we talk to, our leaders in our church, our parents, you know, and if your whole network feels funny about this thing that you're saying, this is God, then maybe it isn't God, you know, and I mean, for us, these are people that we trust over the years, that we know, you know, we can talk to, we can pray with, and so that's often one of the leading signs that if there's no affirmation at all, you know, then maybe we didn't hear right. And so it's always important for us to check and double check and not be afraid of saying, you know, yes, I'm in Joburg right now, but the number of people I told to say, I've got this opportunity, and the positive affirmation also said to me, okay, no, this is the right moment, right season, right time, and just not being afraid to say it, and also to get to sometimes get the negative, you know, it's not affirmation, I don't know what you call it, but not being afraid that I may say, this is what I feel I need to do in this season, and not get the support that I was expecting to get, and being able to go back to the drawing board and start afresh.
Yeah, I'm hearing like community. Hey, I think when we were chatting earlier, that came through so strongly, and it's so counter to so much of the, especially Western culture. Like, we're very individualistic. We make our decisions based upon what we think is going to be best. But I love how you opened that decision up to your village, your pastors, your leaders, your parents. You know, so was there a moment where you mentioned earlier, like making mistakes? Was there a moment where you pressed pause?
Yes.
And tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So there's been a few moments, and you know, well, I'm one of those people that are just driven. I'm like, I'm doing this right now, and sometimes, you know, I mean, if I had pressed pause, it would have saved a lot of tears, because you then do the wrong thing, and then you get rejected, and then you have to deal with, but I shouldn't have done this anyway. But I've learned with time to be more and more sensitive, you know, to what the Holy Spirit is saying. A moment that I do want to share about is when we heard different things for ourselves, right? Now, when I got the Harvard opportunity, there was no doubt in any of our minds that this is a door that God has opened. And it was very clear, you know, the word acceleration, you know, that was a very clear word. The kids were young, so we didn't need to ask them what they thought God was saying at the time. Pack your bags, we're going to America. That was it. But I was at a point, I think, you know, you mature, you grow with time. And I was at a point where I feel if God says this to me, then it's to everyone. Everyone must pack their bags. And Kundo, God has said we are going to America. We're not discussing this. And he was very clear that God is saying, yes, go to America. God has opened this door. You need to go to America. But I'm not leaving with you on the 1st of June. And I'm like, no, you haven't heard God. There's a problem with you and your hearing devices. Go back and listen to God. Because there's no way God is going to say something to me as the wife and not confirm it with you. And I don't know about that philosophy, but I learned the hard way that there are times where God has to speak to each one of us. And as much as God gave clarity to both of us that opportunity was mine, but the timing for which Gundo needed to be in America was different from the timing that I needed to be in America. And again, it would have saved me a lot of tears and disappointments and maybe fights if I was more sensitive to the fact that God speaks to each one of us. You know, it's not God is, and God didn't contradict himself, you know.
Sure.
But sometimes we think, okay, because God, you've said, pack your bags and go to this place. Now the entire tribe must stop everything that they are doing and pack their bags and go there. And one of the things that Gundo really felt was that from a financial perspective, there were some, you know, like he still had to carry the mantle to hold the family together. So simply just packing his bags and not playing any, you know, sorting out what does this mean for the family financially and all of that meant that, yeah, it meant that, you know, I was listening through my ears, he was listening through his ears, and I was struggling to understand that my journey and the voice that I hear may have different variations with other family members. And so I think now I'm more sensitive to that even with the kids now, you know, this whole Joburg, Geneva, John Hopkins, having conversations with them to say, what do you think, you know? And I mean, just one quick example, when we moved to Cape Town and being a young mom with young kids, I thought you have to take your kids everywhere you go. And after some time, I realized how every time they went with me on a trip, you'd see that they are on the edge, you know, sort of. I was taking them out of their comfort zone. And so me going away for a weekend and coming back home, the kids were happy because they wanted to be in their comfortable home. As long as one parent was at home, the kids felt fine. And so I've learned that, you know, not to copy and paste everything for everyone. Let me listen for myself. Listen for yourself. Let the kids listen. And let's all do this journey together. God is not going to throw us in separate parts of the world and divide us. But we also need to be sensitive that we're not doing a copy and paste for everyone in the family.
And on that, I think it can be tempting for us to look at different people, even different people in our group, and say, well, they do it that way, that's the model.
Yeah.
But it, you know, and it might not work for our particular individual context. Hey, we've each got to find our own rhythms. We've each got to find our way of doing things that are going to help our own families thrive.
And I always say, you know, test it.
Yeah.
You know, if we had been wrong 6 years ago, I don't think we'd be sitting next to each other right now. You know, and sometimes you do have to step out and test it. And if you see that, okay, we made a wrong decision here, but I think the fruits do speak for themselves. Sure. You know, when you've really heard God. And you purposely continuing to want to walk right with God, the fruits do speak for themselves.
Yeah, I love that. That's so powerful. The fact that we got to look at what's being produced. So when you said, like, well, my kids were unsettled every time I took them away, like, that's not great fruit. So it's looking at the fruit of everyone's lives and saying, well, is this working? You know, there's wisdom in that. So you have many hats. Obviously, you're a mom, you're a wife, you have so much going for you as a doctor, PhDs, different jobs. Tell us how you manage the juggle.
So I say the word balance doesn't exist because we all want to sit here and say, I just have learned how to balance, but there is no balance at all. I'll put that disclaimer. You know, one of my pastors many years ago said something quite profound to me that, you know, God expects 100% in each of the things that you do. It's not I'm a 20% mom, I'm a 40% wife, I'm a 30% in my work. It's give your 100, 100, 100. Yes, it might end up being 60, 75, whatever, but give your 100 in each thing that you do. And that's what I try to do, that as a wife, let me put in my 100. My 100% as a wife doesn't mean being at home every day of the week, and it doesn't mean cooking supper every day of the week.
Amen.
But in understanding what the role means for me and my husband and my family, I have found what giving my 100% means. Same as being a parent. I used to feel like traveling so much, I'd feel guilty, mommy guilt, you leave home, you're in another country, you crying, the kids are fine, you're the one who's crying, why have I done this, am I such a horrible mom? And actually, one time I was in Malawi, I was feeling so bad, but the person that I actually spoke to was one of Farai's teachers, because we had a really good relationship, and I was telling her, I feel so bad, I've left him, it's the last week of school, and she just reaffirmed me to say, Farai is doing well. He's happy, he's comfortable. I was with him today. But the work that you're doing is also so important, and God is using you in what you are doing. And I like to call it, the work of the Lord, that, these are not just careers that we are doing. We're really doing the work of the Lord and trying to do that God has called us to do in our workspaces. And so there will be moments in the day where I know my kids need me, stop everything that you're doing, whether I'm at home or not, but this is a Farai moment, But that doesn't mean now I should stop my professor job and put everything on hold. And there are times where there is a crisis at work and I need to pay attention to that crisis. And maybe the kids, yes, they want me to be there for their play date, but I'm sorting out a crisis at work, and nothing's going to fall apart if I'm not at that play date. And so I think the juggle is about being able to discern where you should be at which time, every day, versus trying to have a formula to make it all
great.
work.
Very good. Yeah. Very. So how do you make that discernment on the spot? Is it most urgent? Is it like what's the grid that you run it through in your mind?
I mean, it's not an X plus Y equals Z squared.
Yeah.
You need to be in tune and in touch with God, with the Holy Spirit. It boils down to that, because there are moments where your kids look fine and you find they're actually not fine. Now, no formula is going to tell you that you needed to stop everything that you're doing right now and go home and spend this afternoon with your child. But the Lord who has called us, who sees all that we're doing, who understands all of our needs, can direct me, And I've always said, Lord, direct my footsteps. And it's in those moments that you constantly, God has to be the center. You don't wake up and say, okay, it's my husband and then my kids. God has to be the center. Then He'll show you where you need to be at each moment.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Salome.
Thank you. Also, what I'm hearing you say is, when you're there, be present. So when you're with your kids, be 100% present. When you're with your work, be 100% present. A friend of mine often says, be where your pinky toes are. You can be in this room and not be present. You can be with your kids and not be present. So it's such a powerful thought, like be 100% there. There's an intensity if you're present. And that counts for so much. So thank you. It's very profound.
Shane Willard spoke on the other evening about the direction of our shoulders, and what I'm taking from your comment now is like trust the Holy Spirit to direct the direction of our shoulders in terms of, is it the kids in this moment, is it the church in this moment, is it the staff, Turning to your leadership role specifically now, Salome, like you play a leadership role in the sense that you're on some boards. And you told us a story which was like really encouraging when we were chatting about being on the board. And I think you're chair of the board, and your CEO was going through a tough time. And the business was close to like the bottom. Just talk us through listening in the context of leadership specifically, having to give directional leadership to people.
So leading boards is a very interesting, it's a very interesting space, because you have to drive the strategy, you're driving the success of the organization, but you're not there. You might have never even been to the offices, with the virtual spaces and everything. You might have never been there. You don't understand who's who. It might be an organization with 1,000 people. All you know is the top 5 people in that organization.
Yeah.
But yet you've got the responsibility of driving the strategic direction, of ensuring that they succeed. And I have on not just with one board, but where everything collapses. It comes a time when the organization actually starts collapsing. Financially, you can't see beyond the next year, and everything that's been invested, wrong decisions were made, a wrong hire was made, and everything falls apart. Now, in those instances, I've had to say, not under my watch. This organization is not going to die under my watch.
Yeah, so good.
But now you need to provide the wisdom to say, what do we need to do to ensure that this history and legacy is not destroyed by what is happening now? And we've seen it. Right now in global health, a lot is happening. Organizations have ended because of loss of money from the US, etc. We saw it during COVID, where organizations fell apart. But then there are also organizations which thrived and still did well and did better. And I think that requires wisdom, discernment in terms of the decisions that need to be made, because it's not like you can say, guys, this is what you need to do. There are some things that you can prescribe to them to say, I think this is what needs to happen. And 2-3 years later, it actually worked. When you are saying, this is what I think you need to do, you don't always know that it's the right thing and it's going to work. But you also rely on wisdom from God to lead you and direct you. And also, having the insight to suggest and recommend things that will actually take it to its next level and not end it altogether.
Yeah. Tell us about that example where the CEO was, it was close to shutdown time.
Yes.
How did you interact with him from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, I think, in the leadership, we're both very clear that we wanted to protect this organization by all costs. It's not going to end under our watch. And then we needed to come up with strategies. And the strategies that I felt would work were, let's understand the strengths of this organization. Now, let's forget everything we want to do, what we've done. What do we do well? What do we do well? What's our contribution? What are we known for? What are we remembered for? Let's rebrand. Let's re-strategize. Let's diversify, sources of income. Let's come up with a new plan and almost reinvent what we have. And about 2 years later, what felt like a sinking ship at that time, turned into something that's really beautiful. But it was at some point, let's let go of, of the dust, all the things that
Yeah,
are nice to have. Sometimes all the people that are nice to have but are not necessarily building the organization and what it's meant to be.
Yeah.
And then let's rebuild something that's relevant and do what we are really good at. And we've seen success
Yeah,
with
it's
that.
great.
It's really
Beautiful,
powerful.
Beautiful.
I have a question which we haven't discussed. And I was just thinking as you were talking, there's so many pastors in the room and leaders who would love to have Dr. Salome and Gundo in our congregations. How is it that we as pastors should lead and love high capacity people?
Great question, Kate. Great question.
Sure. So let me first acknowledge my pastors. What I found was really unique and special about our church, the People's Church, was having pastors who saw us as individuals and recognized our calling and what we do. And previously, I'd been to many churches where it was purely about service. Like, we can't see you outside of connect group, worship team, all of these. We've done everything from ushering to leading, children's church, everything, in our various seasons and stages of our lives. But there also comes a time where your own calling has to be recognized and supported. And what I truly appreciated was having pastors who see us and hear us and are interested in how we are contributing to the world in our own ways. And yes, we can do all the other things, the ushering and all of that, but it's also important that as pastors that you align and recognize with our giftings that are not always going to be within the church. One of my mentors from this was when I was in varsity. These were our pastors in varsity. And I walked up to her and said, I think God has called me into full-time ministry. And she said, no, he hasn't. I said, but I want to serve and I want to do this. And she said to me, God has called you to advise governments, to improve healthcare, to lead healthcare, and all of these things. And she literally looked into what has God placed in you, and not my temporary desire to want to get recognized in the church. And I really value that.
Wow, it's very, very good. As we wrap up this interview, which has been incredible, firstly, I think we want to say thank you. Thank you for following your calling. Thank you for listening to the voice of God. You are literally changing our nation for the better. So thank you. Talk to us just a little bit of what is your understanding of wisdom as we close.
Sure, they save the most difficult question for the end. Sure. So there's logic, right? Logic is me. It's what's inside my head. It's the straight and narrow path, and we can use logic to make decisions. But logic doesn't tell you what lies ahead. Logic doesn't tell you what's going to happen when this goes wrong. And wisdom is different, Wisdom guides you. Wisdom leads you. Wisdom somehow knows you need to do this so that you can get to that place and that place. Wisdom is not a straight road. It has detours, value, all of that, because and wisdom can only be God. Let me just put it that way, because wisdom is a God that knows where He is taking you and why He's taking you there, and where He wants you to go, not just for yourself, but what He wants you to be, to the world at large. And to solve problems, to solve, so we say in our industry that we're trying to solve, the greatest world's challenges. You need wisdom, not logic. Because logic will tell you that there's corruption here, so stop, give up on the system because
Yeah.
But wisdom will tell you that you need to invest in this, invest in the people that are doing what they are meant to be doing wholeheartedly, grow that community, and suddenly those who are corrupt will get fewer and fewer and fewer, and suddenly you'll find a new ecosystem and a new world.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Yeah. Mm. I wrote down a phrase from our previous chat when we were preparing for this, and it's really impacted me and helped me a lot. You said to me in that you gave this definition just off the cuff. You said it's the ability to wisdom is the ability to see what's not obvious to other people. And I thought to myself, wow, imagine that as pastors, we could stimulate an imagination for wisdom that looks like that. That we would be the seers of the unobvious. What's below the surface, like what's in the current. Not just the ships on the top of the ocean, but like what's the current driving things. And so I thought maybe we could pray into that. So I'm going to ask us, firstly, Salome, thank you. Huge thanks. Huge thanks. You have a ton going on, and you chose to be here with us today. Cans, thank you so much for interviewing with me. We appreciate it. Let's give them a big thank you.